Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. John Haynes, the man with nothing to lose. The man who rules the world runs into the irresistible force of a man with nothing to lose in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get the regular and variant editions of John Haynes, the man with nothing to lose on Amazon.com today. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson is exploring opening up city-owned grocery stores in areas that are considered to be food deserts in Chicago.
Well, despite that $500 million city deficit, the mayor is exploring the idea of opening a city-owned grocery store to promote food equity.
But as CBS 2's Jermont Terry found out, you won't be able to buy food anytime soon.
He's live in the newsroom to break it down for us. Jermont.
Joe and Erica, this is simply a plan and one done in small cities. But if the city-owned grocery store gets up and running, and that is a big if, Chicago will be the largest city to accomplish this. Tonight, Mayor Brandon Johnson's team explains the need for this push. Many neighborhoods on the south and west sides are without quality grocery stores. Windows are boarded up after private chains moved out. Take this former Aldi at 76 in Ashland in Auburn Gresham. It closed more than a year ago.
All of our stores are closing. And so now we have to go outside of our neighborhoods.
Native Southsider Shelley Williams welcomes any plans to bring grocery stores back. That includes Mayor Brandon Johnson's newest initiative to get the city into the grocery chain business.
So I think that's a good idea that Mayor Johnson is picking up the slack where these big store chains are leaving.
Under Mayor Johnson's proposal, the city would use economic development grants. Yumi Grisby, the administration's policy chief, says the city will team up with an organization to open a city-owned grocery in one of Chicago's food deserts.
And so we are not spending any taxpayer dollars, right? What we're also going to be able to access is the funding that exists at the national level, at the state level.
The major grocery chains claim they left these communities because it just was not profitable. So it begs the question how Mayor Johnson can flip that narrative.
And so it's not necessarily about profitability. It really is about what is the impact on Chicagoans.
How does a grocery store get pushed ahead of crime and safety over other things?
I don't want to say that this is taking a priority. I would like to say that overall, it's not also about a grocery store. What it is about increasing access to healthy options and to food for all Chicagoans.
And while the mayor's office says the grocery store will be funded by grant money, we should note some of the grant money could come from state and federal tax dollars, just not local tax dollars. There's no timeline when this initiative would or could move forward. Live in the newsroom tonight, Jermont Terry, CBS 2 News. Joe and Erica.
Jermont, thank you.
Now, Brandon Johnson is proposing that the city open up grocery stores in areas that have suffered from a food drought. Now, this food drought comes as many chain stores such as Walmart, Aldi, and Target have left these Chicago areas, and as they've left these Chicago areas, these areas do not have grocery stores and supermarkets for local residents to shop at. Now, the reason why I believe they don't have these stores is not only have to do with crime, but it also has to do with the gentrification of these areas. Because many of these areas did have small, local retailers that ran small businesses. However, those businesses wound up getting pushed out by many of these major corporations as they were looking to go out here and get grant money. Now, something similar happened here in New York in areas like Harlem, and I remember when we had the Upper Manhattan Empowerment Zone, and the Upper Manhattan Empowerment Zone was offering lots of grants as they opened up things like the Pathmark of Harlem. And as they opened up a whole bunch of stores in Harlem, such as the Pathmark of Harlem, which was open from 1998 to about 2015, there were lots of big chains coming to Harlem, and they were coming because they were getting lots of money from the federal government. And as these big chains got lots of tax credits and lots of grant money, they pushed out a lot of the small businesses that were in those areas serving the community. And as they pushed those businesses out, what happened was these chains came in, but these chains only were looking to stay in those areas as long as the government was offsetting their cost by giving them tax credits and giving them grant money so that would allow them to be able to be subsidized by the government. However, once the grants started to run out, as we changed from the Clinton administration to the Bush Jr. administration, what happened with that money is the funding ran out, and when the funding ran out, the corporations wanted to leave those areas. That's something that happened here in New York, in Harlem, which led to the closing of the Pathmark of Harlem, led to the closing of several other stores, such as stores down the strip of 125th Street, and I believe the exact same thing happened all throughout Chicago that led to this food desert that's going on. What's happened, I believe, in this whole situation is that most of these corporations went out here and wanted to use their balance sheets as an excuse to get out of inner city neighborhoods. And the reason why they wanted to get out of these inner city neighborhoods is they wanted to make the excuse saying, oh, these stores aren't performing as well as stores in other areas, and because they wanted to go out here and be able to get out of these areas, they use this as an excuse to leave these areas. Moreover, they also say that all of this is also due to the high crime in those areas. However, there was no reports of high crime when these guys wanted to open up these stores. No, they oftentimes bragged about how they were looking to open up these stores to give people opportunities. I remember that type of talk made in the year 1999 when I went to apply for a job at the Pathmark of Harlem on 125th Street. I remember when people were talking about, oh, it's going to lead to so many opportunities, but as time went on, what happened was the grant money started to dry up, and because they could not get funding out of a Bush-run Congress and presidency to be able to continue funding the Upper Manhattan Empowerment Zone, what happened was this is where these stores started to go into a state of decline because there was no more government subsidies or tax credits, and that's where we started to see the narrative shift from economic opportunity to one talking about crime. And that's what I believe is happening in Chicago right now as related to what's happening with these big chains. These big chains like your Aldis, your Walmarts, your Targets, what they want to do is use the cover of crime and also talking about the stores performing poorly as one of the reasons for them looking to go out here and close up these businesses. But the main reason why I believe they want to close these businesses is because they're not able to go out here and get that big grant money or the tax credits like they used to do. Because what subsidizes, again, these businesses are things like the work opportunity tax credit. I've seen that on multiple applications that I've applied for jobs in retail, and I've seen them also talk about other sorts of tax credits. So a lot of these businesses, these corporations, get lots of tax breaks, and that's basically what is their main motivation for opening up in inner city areas. And they do this again because they want to get paid at the expense of the people. But what happens with those areas is that what happens is that as the neighborhood, as they stop getting the grant money, many of these businesses want to leave, and that's what leaves a big hole in these areas. I talked about this in depth in one of my novels, The Thetas, as related to the women of the Theta sorority, and as they're looking to try to maintain the black businesses in an area. They talk about why they wanted to maintain the black businesses in their towns because they understood the importance of maintaining mom and pop businesses, because it's the mom and pop businesses that provide for the needs of the community in not only providing goods and services to people, but also providing employment for most of the people there. And they will provide more stable employment than a corporate business, because the corporate business only wants to do business when it can profit at the expense of the people. It doesn't look to enrich people. And once the money starts running out on the spreadsheets, that's when they want to look to close businesses in an area. I saw this happen in my own new neighborhood with the Stop and Shop on Eastchester Road, a Stop and Shop that had only been there for 5 years, but because it was not performing, they decided to close that location. And again, this is what I believe is happening here in Chicago. Now, Brandon Johnson's proposal to go out here and open up city-run businesses is destined to fail, and it would be destined to fail because such a plan is not one that is sustainable, considering the sad state of affairs of Chicago's fiscal budget. Now, former Mayor Lori Lightfoot did leave Chicago with a $85 million surplus, and as she left it with an $85 million surplus, she told the new mayor not to mess it up. But in less than 90 days, Brandon Johnson has basically foobarred the entire budget by going out here and looking to toe the party line of the Blue Party in their campaign to virtue signal by trying to care for migrants who have been bused to the city by Greg Abbott. And as the Brandon Johnson has been dealing with trying to take care of all of these migrants, he's basically created a over $500 million deficit for the city of Chicago. And as he's created this deficit, he's now also having to deal with the crisis, as many of these retailers have basically abandoned the city of Chicago. Now, most of these retailers want to say that it is just high crime that is the reason for them looking to close many of their stores in Chicago. But the real reason I believe they are really looking to close is also due to the fact that they can't get any more of that grant money that allows them to go out here and subsidize their businesses. Now, yes, there has been a narrative of there being problems with all of this shoplifting going on, and a lot of those issues have been created by a lot of dysfunctional Blue Party policies, such as bail reform, like here in New York, and also policies that state that a retailer can't really prosecute anyone if they steal items that cost under $900. Now, both of these policies basically have opened a door for shoplifters to come into retailers, and as those shoplifters have allegedly come into retailers, this has caused a lot of retailers to have a lot of shrink, and as they've had lots of shrink, this has led to stores not being able to perform well in proportion to other retailers and across the country. And because stores don't perform well in proportion to other retailers, what happens is many of those corporate bosses then compare the performance of stores and looks to close these stores, especially in predominantly poor and black areas. And that leaves these areas having food deserts, because it's those areas wind up with no businesses, because the mom and pop stores that originally served those areas were pushed out by gentrification, and those gentrified stores that came to those areas from those government grants, what those businesses do is go out here and wind up leaving, because stores don't perform in proportion to other stores across the region, and that leaves those areas desolate without any sort of business. And the residents of those areas, what happens to them is they're forced to get into buses or cars or even Ubers and drive into other areas that are predominantly white or non-black, in order to do their shopping. And what that does is that takes money out of those communities and makes it where 97% of predominantly black dollars wind up leaving the community permanently with no way of coming back. And this is what Brandon Johnson is proposing, that the city come in here and open up businesses, but that whole approach would be a failure considering the way government runs businesses like the United States Post Office. Now, when it comes to the post office, it's one of those businesses that is not really run very well. Usually if you come there, they have like 6 windows, but only 2 are running, and you have to wait an extended period of time in order to go out here and be served. Now, in retail, business is about trying to turn over merchandise, but the whole thing is when everything in government doesn't really run very well because everything has to go through bureaucracy, and oftentimes it takes a lot of different paperwork for something to come to the marketplace. So if the state ran a business, it would not run very well because it would take weeks to get items in stock, and it would also go out here and take time to go out here and even be able to process people, because the entire process for government run anything is a nightmare. So what Brandon Johnson is proposing would be a complete disaster, considering that the government doesn't really, again, run businesses very well as related to its own business. And again, with the city being in debt, there would be no way to take this business into profitability as related to running a city-run retail establishment. Moreover, there wouldn't be much way to secure that kind of business. So this would be a disaster on the level of the state-run stores in Venezuela and other countries. And again, not something that would be viable as related to business in these areas. Now, if Brandon Johnson really wanted a solution to the whole issue of opening up stores in these areas, one, he would basically try to do something about a lot of the crime, and that would mean getting rid of these bail reform plans, which enable Pookies and Ray Rays to not receive any sort of punishment for their crimes. And when I say Pookie and Ray Ray, I don't just mean black guys, I mean white guys and Hispanic guys too, because there are Hispanic Pookies and Ray Rays who do a lot of this shoplifting, and white Pookies and Ray Rays who do it too. So that would be one thing. And to repeal any law as related to not punishing shoplifting under $900, because punishing people, that would also be a major deterrent in stopping a lot of the shoplifting. Now, as related to retailers, I believe that they really need to get rid of the self-checkouts, because the self-checkouts were one of the things that enabled a lot of the shoplifting. And when you go out here and have a self-checkout, all that does is open the door for a lot of the theft that causes the shrink. So on the retailer side, that has to go if you want to go out here and open up a viable business. And you also are going to need to go out here and encourage grants and loans to many of these small business owners to open up the mom and pop shops, because we clearly see that the mom and pop shops are essential to maintaining a community. And when we went out here and gentrified these areas, we basically led to them having these deserts, because I've seen these same kind of deserts happen here in New York. I mean, after the Pathmark of Harlem wound up closing back in 2015, that left a major food desert in Harlem on the east side. And if it wasn't for the superfood town opening all the way up on the west side on Sugar Hill, that area basically would be a completely barren food desert. And again, this is what happens when you allow all of these big corporate businesses to go out here and get their tax breaks and their tax credits at the expense of black people. Those black people wind up in a barren food desert. And again, that's because these corporations, all they're looking to do is get the tax breaks and the tax credits and profit off the people without looking to give them anything to profit from. Now, again, this city-run thing would be a complete disaster because, again, the government is not good at the business of doing business like retail, and with the razor-thin profit margin, this business wouldn't profit at all. Moreover, there would be issues with credit as related to dealing with distributors who would want their money up front. So this would be an overall disaster, and it would be something that would not work. But what would work is, again, looking to find ways to encourage small business ownership, something that wound up falling apart after the COVID lockdowns. We really do need to encourage the mom and pop shops, because it's the mom and pop shops that basically enable many people in these areas to be employed, and it's the mom and pop shops that provide all of the groceries and the food in these areas. Now, some conspiracy theorists will go out here and say this is being done deliberately, but no, this is a combination of political incompetence, corporate greed, and also a lot of people went out here destroying many of these businesses, looking to go out here and think that they could continue to make steal from these businesses and that they would allow this to continue to happen. Again, this is a perfect storm of dysfunction. And again, when I listen to Brandon Johnson's proposal, it further exacerbates all of that dysfunction because, again, a government-run business would basically not be one that would provide good service for people. I mean, the government basically, when it was all it does was providing surplus cheese and surplus items, they had a whole lot of problems even doing that with even free items. I remember back in the 80s with all the government cheese and the government meats and stuff, they had a whole headache of distributing that stuff. So they would have even twice the problems of getting supplies because the government, again, you have to go through city council and all these people to just get any sort of money paid. And again, all that bureaucratic rigmarole is a nightmare to deal with, and that would keep items from coming to the stores, similar to what happens in many areas that have many in these communist countries where people can't get bread at a certain time, they can't get certain groceries at a certain time, and that leads to the opening up of black markets. But Brandon Johnson's proposal just shows how disconnected and out of touch he is, because the solutions are in front of him, and again, the solutions are the ones, again, of finally getting rid of this bail reform, which is a complete disaster, going out here, repealing these laws as related to shoplifting and items under $900, and also going out here and finally prosecuting many of these individuals who are participating in this shoplifting, and also making a call to these families to finally check all of these children of the corn who have been running wild in every city. I mean, there's a whole comprehensive process to dealing with this, but the whole thing is people like Brandon Johnson don't want to be accountable or responsible for that action. No, they want to come up with cockamamie schemes like government-run stores. No, the government doesn't need to be in the business of retail. No, what we need to do is go out here and let small businesses come up and compete, because we clearly see that the big corporations don't want to do business within inner city areas, and what they wanted to do was push out all those businesses. And sadly, everything that I wrote about in the Thetas in 2013 is coming true in these areas of Chicago, where once the corporation starts to see that that businesses aren't performing in proportion to other stores, what they do is want to close those stores, leaving it with nothing at all. And that's why it's important for us to have black-owned businesses in these areas, because it's black-owned businesses that will feed and care for the people, and it's black-owned businesses that will provide work for people. So that's where we need to start doing the investing, investing in small, independent businesses, black-owned businesses, because that's how you feed a black community, and that's how you keep the black dollar in the black community and keep it from traveling outside of the black community, further keeping black people in poverty and further keeping them away from their own dollars, because that's what gentrification has done: pushed black people out of their communities, pushed black dollars out of their communities, and pushed black people into a food desert. Again, these deserts are done by design because there's no more grant money from the government to subsidize these businesses. So we've got to subsidize our own businesses by investing in our own businesses and looking out for our own businesses by not stealing from our businesses. So that's what's done in every other community, and we've got to get on the ball as related to taking care of our business, because when we let other people take care of our business, it winds up going out of business and leaving us with nothing as related to making sure that we get what we need. Now, if you want to learn more about the whole foundation of black-owned businesses that I talk about in my inspiring, uplifting, sophisticated sorority novel, The Thetas, you can pick that book up on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find that book at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, Google Play, and Barnes & Noble. And if you want to see me be able to make more videos like this, you can send a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available in paperback and e-readers, The Temptation of John Haynes. Give in to temptation and pick up this action-packed African-American paranormal romance. Get The Temptation of John Haynes in paperback and e-readers today.
Support black-owned and black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.